Long before modern civilization mapped the world, something extraordinary was already rising from the earth. Massive stone cities appeared in deserts with no nearby water source. Underground tunnels stretched for kilometers beneath mountains. Temples were aligned so precisely with the stars that certain chambers still light up on exact days thousands of years later. In some ruins, the stones are cut with angles so sharp and surfaces so smooth that archaeologists still debate how they were made without advanced machinery. Entire civilizations vanished, yet their engineering survived earthquakes, floods, and centuries of erosion, as if they understood something modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Every new excavation seems to uncover another impossible detail buried beneath history. And the deeper researchers dig into the ancient world, the more one terrifying possibility begins to emerge. Perhaps the past was never as primitive as we were taught to believe. Stenar is one of the most mysterious ancient monuments ever discovered in Scandinavia. Built from 59 enormous stones arranged into the shape of a gigantic ship nearly 67 meters long, the monument stands high above the Baltic Sea near the fishing village of Koseberga in southern Sweden. Archaeologists still debate why ancient builders transported multi-ton stones onto such an exposed coastal ridge, why the structure was shaped like a massive stone ship, and whether its alignment with the movement of the sun was intentional or accidental. Radiocarbon evidence discovered beneath several stones dates much of the site to around 550 to 600 AD during the late Nordic Iron Age, although some researchers believe parts of the monument could be older. Over the decades, Stenar has been interpreted as a burial monument, a ritual gathering site, a navigational landmark, and even a giant astronomical calendar. Yet no explanation has fully solved the mystery surrounding its true purpose. The monument's location immediately raises questions. Unlike many Scandinavian stone monuments hidden inland, Stenar was deliberately built on one of the highest coastal ridges in the region, directly overlooking the Baltic Sea. From offshore, the monument's silhouette becomes visible against the horizon long before sailors reach the cliffs themselves. This unusual placement has led historians to suspect the site may have held ceremonial or navigational importance connected to the sea. Stone ship monuments already existed across Scandinavia during the Iron Age, often associated with burials and symbolic journeys into the afterlife. However, Stenar is dramatically larger than most surviving examples. The scale alone suggests the monument may have served a much greater purpose than a simple grave marker. The engineering required to build the monument was extraordinary. Several stones weigh multiple tons, and researchers believe some may have been transported from locations many kilometers away. Two of the largest quartzite stones are thought to originate near Brantevik, roughly 20 kilometers from the site. Moving such massive stones uphill across uneven terrain without modern machinery would have required careful planning, organized labor, and sophisticated construction methods. But the greatest mystery surrounding Stenar may involve astronomy. The monument's long axis is aligned northwest to southeast. According to several astronomical studies, the northwestern end aligns closely with the sunset during the summer solstice, while the southeastern end aligns with the sunrise during the winter solstice. During midsummer, observers standing inside the monument can watch the sun descend near the northwestern bow stone. During midwinter, the rising sun appears near the southeastern end. Some archaeoastronomy researchers believe this alignment was intentional. Researcher Howard Crowhurst proposed that the monument functioned as a giant solar calendar capable of tracking seasonal changes throughout the year. Later studies by Amelia Carolina Sparavigna suggested that additional stone alignments may also correspond to lunar standstills and moonset positions. Other researchers argue the spacing of the stones may encode parts of the solar cycle itself. If true, the builders of Stenar may have possessed a surprisingly advanced understanding of astronomy centuries before formal scientific systems appeared in Northern Europe. However, many archaeologists remain skeptical. Critics argue that ancient monuments often appear astronomically aligned by coincidence, and no surviving written records prove the monument was designed as an observatory or calendar. Because the original builders left no explanation behind, proving intentional astronomical design remains extremely difficult. The monument's true age is also heavily debated. Excavations during the 1980s uncovered charcoal, burned organic material, and a decorated clay urn containing cremated human remains. Radiocarbon analysis dated many of these discoveries to approximately 540 to 650 AD, strongly supporting an Iron Age origin. Yet geologist Nils Axel Murner and archaeologist Bob Lind argued that nearby Bronze Age artifacts, including bronze tools and ritual objects, may suggest the site originally dates much earlier, possibly around 700 BC before later reconstruction occurred during the Iron Age. According to this theory, Ali Stenar may have been reused across multiple historical periods rather than built all at once. Another major mystery involves what is missing from the site. Many Scandinavian stone ships functioned as burial monuments containing major graves or cremation chambers. Yet excavations at Ales Stenar uncovered surprisingly little evidence of a large tomb beneath the structure. No royal burial chamber has ever been found at the centre of the monument. This has led some researchers to suspect the monument may never have been primarily funerary at all. Instead, the structure may have served as a ceremonial gathering place connected to solar worship, seasonal rituals, or maritime traditions tied to the Baltic Sea. Throughout Bronze Age Scandinavia, ships frequently appeared in rock carvings associated with the movement of the sun across the sky. Some historians believe Ales Stenar may represent that same cosmological symbolism transformed into monumental stone architecture. More than 200 years ago, an entire city on top of a volcanic mountain vanished in a single morning. Columns collapsed across stone streets. Churches folded into themselves. Reservoirs cracked open beneath the ground. Thousands of tons of basalt tumbled down narrow roads overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Then the city was abandoned so completely that over time, even its memory began to disappear. Today, the ruins of Hippos Susita still remain frozen almost exactly where they fell during the catastrophic earthquake of January 18, 749 CE. Archaeologists describe the destruction as one of the clearest preserved earthquake snapshots in the ancient Near East. Entire rows of columns still lie facing the same direction. Streets remain buried beneath collapsed masonry. Some buildings were never rebuilt or disturbed again after the disaster. But the greatest mystery surrounding Hippos is not how it died. It is how such a city was ever constructed in the first place. Hippos stood more than 350 meters above the Sea of Galilee on an isolated basalt ridge in the modern Golan Heights. The location is extreme even by ancient standards. Steep cliffs surround much of the summit, and natural freshwater sources are almost non-existent. Yet beginning in the 2nd century BCE, during the Seleucid period, engineers transformed this volcanic hill into one of the major cities of the Decapolis, the alliance of Greco-Roman cities spread across the eastern frontier of the Roman world. Modern excavations led by the University of Haifa since 2000 uncovered paved Roman roads, forums, bath complexes, churches, underground reservoirs, and monumental public architecture spread across the summit. The scale of construction immediately creates a problem for archaeologists. Hippos was built largely from basalt, an extremely dense volcanic stone that is notoriously difficult to cut and transport. Even with modern tools, moving large basalt blocks across steep terrain is difficult. Ancient builders somehow carried thousands of tons of this material uphill while simultaneously constructing a fully organized Roman city, complete with theatres, water systems, and religious complexes. The forum at Hippos measured approximately 42 by 42 meters and was surrounded by imported granite columns brought from distant regions of the empire. Researchers still debate how supply caravans managed to move heavy architectural elements to such an isolated summit without advanced lift-fitting systems. Unlike famous engineering sites such as Petra or Machu Picchu, Hippos remains largely absent from mainstream discussions of ancient construction mysteries, despite presenting equally difficult engineering questions. But the greatest puzzle at Hippos may be hidden underground. The city should not have been able to sustain a large population because the summit had almost no permanent freshwater source. Yet excavations uncovered one of the most advanced hydraulic systems ever found in a mountain settlement of the Roman East. Archaeologists discovered underground cistern networks, rainwater collection systems, basalt pressure pipes, ceramic conduits, vaulted reservoirs, and carefully angled distribution channels carved directly into bedrock beneath the city. In 2020, excavators uncovered evidence of a sophisticated Hellenistic pressure pipe system beneath the settlement. Researchers identified basalt pressure pipes later repaired during the early 5th century CE, using cement layers containing embedded coins, allowing archaeologists to date the reconstruction precisely. The system required accurate calculations of gravity, slope, and internal pressure. A single miscalculation could rupture the pipes or collapse water flow across the city. Yet the hydraulic network functioned for centuries in one of the harshest urban locations in the region. Some of the largest reservoirs were concealed beneath public spaces. Beneath the forum, archaeologists uncovered a massive underground cistern covered by a preserved vaulted structure capable of storing enormous quantities of water. The sophistication of the design has led some researchers to compare aspects of Hippos' hydraulic planning with the water management systems of Petra. The difference is that Hippos operated on unstable volcanic terrain, where erosion and pressure control were far more dangerous. Then, after centuries of survival, the city disappeared almost instantly. On January 18, 749 CE, a devastating earthquake struck the Levant along the Dead Sea Transform fault system. Historical records describe catastrophic destruction across Syria, Palestine, and Jordan. Modern geological estimates place the earthquake near magnitude 7.0. At Hippos, the damage was catastrophic. Entire colonnades collapsed simultaneously. Residential districts were crushed beneath falling masonry. Churches shattered while still active. Unlike many ancient cities destroyed by earthquakes, Hippos was never fully rebuilt. That abandonment preserved the city in extraordinary detail. Archaeologists often compare Hippos to Pompeii, not because of volcanic destruction, but because both cities became frozen snapshots of daily life interrupted by catastrophe. At Hippos, columns still lie where they fell more than 12 centuries ago. Streets remain sealed beneath collapse layers. Household structures, courtyards, and urban districts survived beneath earthquake debris almost untouched by later rebuilding. The Byzantine churches of Hippos reveal another layer of mystery. By the 6th and 7th centuries CE, the city had become a major Christian center containing at least 8 churches spread across the summit. Excavations uncovered mosaic floors, Greek inscriptions, reliquaries, and fragments of painted wall decoration preserved beneath the destruction layers of 749. In the Northwest Church, archaeologists found evidence that Christian builders had reused architectural materials from earlier Roman pagan temples. This blending of cultures appears throughout the city. The mosaic floors themselves remain unusually well preserved considering the environment. Many pigments survived centuries of seismic activity, temperature fluctuation, burial, and exposure. Mineral-based coloring materials retained visible detail after nearly 5,500 years. The durability of the mosaics continues to raise questions about Byzantine mortar chemistry and pigment technology. Beneath the visible ruins, archaeologists continue uncovering underground chambers, tunnels, cisterns, and burial complexes suggesting much of Hippos still remains hidden. Some underground structures appear connected to the city's hydraulic network, while others may have served ritual, military, or storage functions. Large portions of the subterranean system remain only partially excavated. What makes Hippos extraordinary is that it was never simply one civilization. Founded during the Hellenistic era, transformed under Roman control, reshaped during the Byzantine Christian period, and still occupied briefly during the Umayyad era, the city became a physical record of multiple empires layered on top of each other. Greek inscriptions appear beside Roman engineering. Pagan symbols survived within Christian districts. Eastern and Mediterranean architectural traditions merged on a volcanic summit, overlooking one of the most contested landscapes of the ancient world. Deep in the dry mountains of southern Jordan, archaeologists uncovered the ruins of a Nabatean sanctuary that should not have existed here. The site, known as Khirbet ed-Dari, stood far from major rivers, surrounded by harsh valleys and unstable desert terrain. Yet excavations revealed a complex religious and economic center containing temples, underground water systems, ritual courtyards, industrial facilities, paved ceremonial paths, and evidence of long-term settlement. What researchers found beneath the dust suggested something unexpected. 2,000 years ago, the Nabateans were not simply desert traders. They were highly advanced engineers who may have mastered survival technologies still difficult to replicate in arid environments today. The ruins lie near the ancient King's Highway, one of the oldest trade routes in the Middle East. For centuries, caravans carrying frankincense, spices, perfumes, textiles, and copper crossed these mountains between Arabia and the Mediterranean world. During the Nabatean period, especially between the 1st century BCE and 2nd century CE, Khirbet ed-Dari became part of the same commercial network that made Petra rich. But unlike Petra, this settlement remained hidden deep inside a difficult valley where permanent survival should have been extremely hard. The site was first documented in 1818 by British travellers Charles Irby and James Mangles. Major excavations only began in 1984 under Jordanian archaeologist Zaidan al-Muhaizen and French archaeologist François Villeneuve. Over the next decades, archaeologists uncovered monumental architecture buried beneath layers of collapse and erosion. They found ritual chambers, vaulted halls, olive presses, workshops, domestic housing, and one of the most sophisticated hydraulic systems ever discovered in a Nabatean settlement outside Petra. The greatest mystery of Khirbet H-Dari is water. Southern Jordan receives very limited rainfall, while sudden flash floods can destroy structures within minutes. Yet the Nabateans built underground channels, reservoirs, runoff collection systems, and stone-cut water pathways capable of storing and distributing water with remarkable efficiency. Excavations in the 1990s documented at least 11 meters of subterranean canalization beneath sections of the sanctuary itself. Archaeologists also found evidence of agriculture and food production operating in terrain that today appears almost impossible to farm consistently. Researchers believe the Nabateans engineered systems that captured seasonal rainfall before directing it into hidden storage networks, protected from evaporation. Similar hydraulic technologies were used at Petra, where dams, ceramic pipes, and concealed cisterns controlled desert floods with extraordinary precision. But Khirbet H-Dari presents an even bigger mystery because the settlement lacked Petra's scale and natural advantages. Even so, it survived for centuries. Some archaeologists now describe the Nabateans as one of the most advanced hydraulic civilizations of the ancient world. At the center of the settlement stood a large sanctuary connected to nearby Khirbet et-Tana, another major Nabatean ritual site excavated in 1937 by American archaeologist Nelson Gluck. Researchers believe both sanctuaries may have formed part of a wider ceremonial network tied to caravan movement across southern Jordan. Inside Khirbet H-Dari, archaeologists uncovered altars, sacred courtyards, ceremonial stairways, processional spaces, and an adyton, the innermost chamber reserved for the most sacred rituals. Yet no one fully understands what happened inside these chambers. Nabatean religion blended Arab traditions with Greek, Roman, and regional influences, creating one of the least understood belief systems of the ancient Near East. Excavations uncovered evidence of incense burning, ritual meals, and animal sacrifice, but the exact ceremonies remain unknown. Some researchers have even investigated whether parts of the sanctuary were aligned with seasonal solar events, suggesting possible astronomical connections hidden within the architecture. The engineering itself creates another mystery. Jordan sits near active tectonic fault systems connected to the Dead Sea Transform. Earthquakes repeatedly damaged settlements throughout the region for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence shows parts of Khirbet H-Dari suffered seismic destruction during the Roman period. Excavations revealed collapsed industrial structures, shattered olive presses, burned olive stones, and ash deposits linked to both fire and earthquake damage. Yet despite centuries of seismic activity, major architectural sections survived. Archaeologists discovered standing columns, intact stylobates, vaulted chambers, and carefully placed stone foundations still visible after nearly 2 millennia. Some researchers believe Nabatean builders may have used flexible stone placement and advanced load distribution methods that allowed structures to absorb seismic stress more effectively than rigid construction systems. Similar theories have been proposed to explain the survival of monuments at Petra. Another unusual feature of the site is the mixture of civilizations preserved within the ruins. Archaeological evidence suggests occupation stretching from the pre-Pottery Neolithic period through the Bronze Age, the Nabatean era, Roman occupation, Byzantine settlement, and early Islamic activity. Over time, the sanctuary itself changed. Nabatean religious architecture merged with Roman engineering influences, while later Christian communities modified parts of the complex during the Byzantine period. Archaeologists even identified the remains of a church dating to approximately the 6th century CE, built near sections of the older sacred structures. But eventually the settlement disappeared. By the late Roman and Byzantine periods, maritime trade routes increasingly replaced inland caravan networks, weakening settlements along the King's Highway. Earthquakes damaged infrastructure, water systems likely deteriorated, and Nabatean political identity vanished after Rome annexed the Nabatean kingdom in 106 CE. Slowly, the sanctuary was abandoned. Wind buried the roads, sediment filled the channels, and the valley faded from history. On the southeastern coast of Öland, a Swedish island in the Baltic Sea, archaeologists uncovered one of the most disturbing ancient crime scenes ever discovered in Europe. Inside the ruins of a circular stone fortress called Sandby Borg, human skeletons were found lying exactly where they died nearly 500 years ago. Some collapsed beside fireplaces. Others were discovered inside doorways or in the middle of rooms. No one buried them. No one returned for the valuables left behind. The entire settlement appears to have been abandoned immediately after a brutal massacre during the late 5th century AD. Sandby Borg was an Iron Age ring fort built during the migration period, around AD 400 to 550. The site was part of a network of fortified settlements across Öland, but Sandby Borg stood out because of its highly organised design. Archaeological surveys revealed 53 stone houses arranged in a circular layout behind massive limestone walls nearly 4 meters thick. The fort covered roughly 5,000 square meters and required advanced planning, engineering, and labour coordination uncommon for Northern Europe at the time. Researchers believe the walls originally stood 4 to 5 meters high, creating a heavily defended settlement overlooking the Baltic coastline. The modern mystery began in 2010 when archaeologists from Kalmar County Museum conducted metal detector surveys across the site. Almost immediately, they uncovered hidden caches of extraordinary wealth. Gold Roman solidi, silver pendants, glass beads, rings, and decorated brooches were found buried inside several houses. Many of these artifacts dated between AD 450 and 510, directly linking Sandby Borg to the final decades of the collapsing Western Roman Empire. The discoveries proved that elite communities in Scandinavia were connected to vast trade and military networks stretching thousands of kilometers south into Roman Europe. Then the skeletons appeared. During excavations beginning in 2011, archaeologists uncovered human remains inside multiple houses. The victims included adult men, elderly individuals, and even children. One skeleton was found face down beside a hearth as if the person had been interrupted during an ordinary daily activity. Another body lay collapsed in a doorway. Several skulls showed evidence of sharp force trauma and crushing blows delivered from above. The injuries strongly suggested execution-style killings rather than deaths during open combat. By 2017, at least 26 individuals had been identified, though archaeologists emphasised that only about 9% of the fortress had actually been excavated. Most of Sandby Borg still remains untouched beneath the soil, meaning many more victims may still be hidden underground. What makes Sandby Borg especially terrifying is not simply the massacre itself, but what happened afterward. Nobody buried the bodies. In almost every known ancient society, burial rituals were considered essential. Even after wars, survivors usually recovered the dead. Yet inside Sandby Borg, corpses were left exactly where they fell for centuries. Valuable objects also remained untouched. Gold coins, silver jewellery, and imported luxury items stayed hidden inside the abandoned houses for over 100 years. This is one of the greatest mysteries surrounding the site. Normally, survivors would return to reclaim wealth, or attackers would loot the settlement after victory, but neither appears to have happened. Archaeologists believe the massacre may have been so complete that nobody survived to return. Another theory suggests the site became socially forbidden, possibly feared by nearby communities after the killings. Ancient Scandinavian traditions often associated abandoned ring forts with curses, dangerous spirits, or taboo ground. Some local legends on Öland described Sandby Borg as an eerie place long before excavations began. The timing of the massacre may also explain its extreme violence. The attack likely occurred during the late 5th century, directly after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Across Europe, political systems were collapsing, trade routes were breaking apart, and tribal conflicts were increasing. Although Scandinavia lay far from Rome itself, Sandby Borg proves the region was deeply connected to the wider chaos of Europe. Roman gold coins found inside the fortress suggest that Scandinavian elites may have served as mercenaries in Roman armies, before returning north with wealth, weapons, and military knowledge. Some researchers believe Sandby Borg was not destroyed by foreign invaders at all. Evidence suggests the attackers may have known the settlement well. Many victims appear to have been killed suddenly without organised resistance, leading to theories of betrayal or internal political violence. The assault may have been a targeted elimination of a powerful family or rival clan, because the valuables were never removed. Some archaeologists suspect the goal was not robbery, but the destruction of the community itself. The fortress architecture makes the event even more shocking. Ring forts like Sandby Borg were designed for protection. The circular defensive walls, controlled entrances, and dense arrangement of houses should have made surprise attacks difficult. Yet the settlement fell rapidly. Some archaeologists believe the attackers may have entered through deception or internal cooperation. Others think the inhabitants were attacked during a feast or seasonal gathering when defences were relaxed. Researchers also discovered evidence that daily life stopped instantly. Food preparation tools, household objects, and animal remains were still positioned inside homes, as if normal activities had been interrupted within minutes. This has led some historians to compare Sandbyborg to Pompeii. Pompeii preserved life through volcanic ash. Sandbyborg preserved death through silence and abandonment. Unlike Pompeii, however, no ancient text ever recorded what happened here. No surviving chronicle describes the massacre. No king claimed responsibility. No legend explains who died behind the stone walls of Sandbyborg. Everything archaeologists know comes only from bones, ruined houses, weapon injuries, and the objects left behind. And the most unsettling fact is that the majority of the fortress has never been excavated. More skeletons may still lie inside collapsed houses beneath the ground. More Roman gold could remain hidden under the stone floors. The identities of the attackers, the reason for the massacre, and the true scale of the killings may still be buried beneath the ruins. For archaeologists, Sandbyborg is one of the clearest snapshots of ancient violence ever discovered in Scandinavia. But for everyone else, it remains something even darker. A perfectly preserved moment when an entire community vanished so completely that even the dead were abandoned where they fell. More than 3,000 years ago, someone climbed into a narrow canyon in what is now southeastern Kazakhstan and carved gigantic human figures directly into black volcanic rock. Their bodies were human, their heads were not. Circular halos exploded outward like rays of sunlight, towering above ritual dancers, sacrificial scenes, and processions of animals. Even today, archaeologists cannot fully explain what these beings were supposed to represent. The site is known as Tamgali petroglyphs, a remote ritual landscape hidden within the Chuili Mountains, roughly 170 kilometers northwest of Almaty. Since its discovery by archaeologist Anna Maximova in 1957, researchers have documented more than 5,000 petroglyphs spread across 48 major clusters. The oldest carvings date to approximately 1500 to 1200 BC during the Middle Bronze Age. UNESCO later described Tamgali as one of the most important concentrations of rock art in Central Asia and added it to the World Heritage List in 2004. But among thousands of carvings showing hunters, animals, and warriors, a small group of images continues to dominate scientific debate. Archaeologists call them the sunhead figures. Unlike ordinary Bronze Age artwork found across Eurasia, these figures appear strangely abstract and symbolic. Some possess circular heads surrounded by radiating spikes. Others stand with arms spread outward, above groups of smaller humans who appear to dance beneath them. At least 30 of these solar figures were originally carved into the canyon walls, Secreto Canyon walls, with around 26 surviving today. No inscriptions accompany them. No written language explains them. Their creators vanished long before recorded history reached the region. Some researchers believe the figures represent solar deities connected to early Indo-Iranian religious systems. Others argue they may depict ritual specialists wearing ceremonial masks used during shamanic ceremonies. A third theory suggests the distorted forms reflect altered states of consciousness experienced during trance rituals. None of these explanations fully solve the mystery. What makes Tamgali especially unusual is that the canyon itself appears to have functioned as a carefully organized sacred landscape rather than a random collection of carvings. The petroglyphs are concentrated in specific ritual zones instead of being spread evenly across the terrain. Certain rock faces contain enormous ceremonial compositions while nearby surfaces remain untouched. Archaeologists have identified scenes showing ritual dancing, sacrificial activity, hunting ceremonies, and symbolic animal processions. This creates an important question. Why would Bronze Age pastoral societies, groups normally associated with migration across open steppe regions, repeatedly return to a fixed mountain canyon generation after generation? The evidence suggests Tamgali may have functioned as a ceremonial gathering site tied to seasonal rituals and religious identity. The canyon was likely not just a place where people lived. It may have been a place where they believed the boundary between the human world and the spiritual world became thinner. The technology behind the carvings deepens the mystery further. The images were created primarily using a pecking technique, in which artists repeatedly struck dark rock surfaces to remove the outer mineral patina layer. The lighter stone beneath produced sharp visual contrast. This method sounds primitive, but the results are surprisingly sophisticated. Many carvings remain visible after more than 3 millennia despite exposure to extreme temperature shifts, erosion, winter freezing, and powerful winds sweeping through the Kazakh steppe. Researchers believe the artists intentionally selected rock surfaces with stable desert varnish coatings because they understood those surfaces would preserve imagery for long periods of time. Some large ceremonial panels maintain remarkable symmetry and spatial organization even today. This suggests long-term planning, technical consistency, and an advanced understanding of how stone weathering worked in harsh environments. The placement of the carvings may also have astronomical significance. Solar imagery dominates the site. The repeated appearance of radiant-headed figures strongly suggests that the sun played a central role in the belief system of the people who created Tamgali. Some archaeologists believe portions of the canyon may have been used during seasonal ceremonies linked to solar cycles, migration patterns, or equinox events, although no complete astronomical system has been definitively proven. The arrangement of certain panels appears too deliberate to be accidental. This possibility becomes more significant when viewed within the broader context of Bronze Age Eurasia. During the 2nd millennium BC, multiple cultures across the steppe and Near East were developing increasingly complex relationships with celestial observation. Solar symbolism, ritual calendars, and sky-oriented religious systems began appearing across enormous geographic regions. Tamgali may preserve part of that forgotten transformation. Some of the strangest imagery at the site goes even further. Several figures appear partially human and partially animal. Others possess distorted limbs, oversized hands, or unnatural body proportions. Horned headdresses appear in multiple ritual scenes. Archaeologists studying Central Asian shamanic traditions have proposed that these carvings may represent visions experienced during trance ceremonies, involving rhythmic dance, drumming, fasting, or psychoactive substances. One major composition contains 6 towering sun-headed beings, standing above groups of smaller humans, locked in what appears to be ceremonial movement. The scene does not resemble ordinary storytelling. It resembles ritual performance frozen into stone. At the same time, the artists behind these surreal images demonstrated extraordinary realism elsewhere in the canyon. Animals including ibex, horses, bulls, wolves, and camels are depicted with surprisingly accurate anatomy and movement. That contrast matters. The same people, capable of realistic observation, deliberately chose to represent the sun-headed figures in a radically symbolic way. This suggests the strange forms were intentional religious imagery rather than failed attempts at realism. Nearly 3,800 meters above sea level, on Bolivia's sacred Isla del Sol in Lake Titicaca, a labyrinth of narrow stone corridors still confuses archaeologists today. The structure is known as the Chincana Labyrinth, a name often translated from Aymara and Quechua traditions as the place where one gets lost. Unlike a palace, fortress or temple built for crowds, this complex feels deliberately disorienting. Tight passages suddenly end in dead ends. Small chambers connect through awkward angles. Visibility disappears after only a few meters. Even after centuries of study, researchers still debate what the structure was truly designed for. The site sits near ancient Inca ceremonial zones connected to the worship of Inti, the sun god. According to Inca mythology recorded by Spanish chroniclers in the 16th century, Lake Titicaca was the birthplace of the first Inca ancestors, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. That alone made Isla del Sol one of the most sacred religious centers in the empire. But the Chincana stands apart from the island's other ruins because its architecture seems intentionally psychological. It was not designed simply to shelter people. It appears designed to control movement, restrict visibility, and create ritual isolation. Spanish explorer and chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon described sacred structures around Lake Titicaca in the 1550s after the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire. Later, archaeological surveys during the 19th and 20th centuries documented the Chincana's unusual layout in greater detail. Excavations confirmed that much of the visible structure dates to the late Horizon period of the Inca Empire, roughly between AD 1450 and 1532. However, some researchers suspect parts of the site may contain older foundations influenced by pre-Inca cultures linked to Tiwanaku civilization, which dominated parts of the Titicaca region centuries earlier. Most ancient structures reveal their purpose quickly. Fortresses maximize visibility. Temples create open ceremonial space. Palaces organize movement efficiently. The Chincana does the opposite. Many corridors narrow to the point where only one person can pass comfortably. Some chambers appear too small for regular habitation. Certain pathways force abrupt turns that break visual orientation completely. Archaeologists studying ritual architecture often compare the effect to ceremonial passage systems found at Chavin de Huántar in Peru, where priests guided initiates through dark, acoustic corridors to create psychological stress and sensory confusion. The Chincana's design has led to several theories. One proposes that the labyrinth functioned as an initiation complex for priests or elite pilgrims. Another suggests it served as a restricted ceremonial zone where movement itself formed part of the ritual. Unlike later European hedge mazes designed for entertainment, this stone maze appears to have been built to create fear, isolation, and symbolic transition. What makes the mystery stronger is the lack of obvious domestic evidence. Archaeologists found limited signs of ordinary long-term habitation inside the core labyrinth itself. There are few indicators of large cooking areas or residential organization. Instead, the structure feels closer to a controlled ceremonial mechanism than a settlement. The engineering challenge behind the Chincana is often overlooked because the stones are not as massive as those at Sacsayhuaman or Machu Picchu. Yet the location itself creates a major problem. Everything had to be transported onto a rocky island in one of the highest navigable lakes on Earth. The thin atmosphere at 3,800 meters reduces human endurance significantly. Modern studies show physical work capacity can drop dramatically at such altitude due to lower oxygen availability. Even today, construction labor at those elevations is exhausting without acclimatization. The builders also had to stabilize walls against erosion, temperature fluctuations, and centuries of wind exposure from Lake Titicaca. Many sections of the Chincana incorporate natural bedrock directly into the construction, reducing the risk of foundation collapse. Some walls lean slightly inward, a technique also seen in other Inca structures to improve seismic resistance. Drainage may have been another hidden technological achievement. Seasonal rain and runoff on steep, rocky terrain can quickly destabilize masonry. Yet significant sections of the labyrinth survived for centuries before modern restoration efforts. Researchers studying Inca hydraulic engineering often point out that the empire excelled at controlling water flow through subtle slope adjustments and hidden channels. Similar techniques may have helped preserve the Chincana. One of the most debated theories surrounding the Chincana involves astronomy. The Inca Empire organized much of its ceremonial calendar around solar events. Temples across the Andes frequently aligned with solstices, equinoxes, or sacred mountain peaks. Some researchers believe specific openings and passage lightings, orientations within the Chincana, may relate to sunrise positions during important ritual periods tied to Inti worship. This theory remains controversial because the labyrinth is irregular and partially damaged, making exact measurements difficult. However, nearby sacred structures on Isla del Sol clearly demonstrate astronomical planning. Pilgrimage routes on the island often directed visitors towards solar observation points overlooking Lake Titicaca. If true, the Chincana may not simply have been a maze. It may have functioned as a ritual machine, combining movement, darkness, confinement, and celestial timing into one controlled religious experience. That idea becomes even more interesting when compared with other ancient ceremonial complexes around the world. The underground galleries of ancient Egypt, the ritual tunnels at Chavin de Huantar, and even the symbolic labyrinth traditions associated with Minoan Crete, all used architecture to manipulate perception. The Chincana may represent an Andean version of the same concept. Local traditions surrounding the Chincana add another layer to the mystery. Stories collected around Lake Titicaca describe hidden passages connected to sacred knowledge, underground routes, and entrances to spiritual realms. Some legends claim priests entered the labyrinth alone during rituals linked to death, rebirth, or communication with supernatural forces. Others describe the site as a gateway where initiates symbolically disappeared before returning transformed. These stories became even more exaggerated after the Spanish conquest. Colonial-era accounts often mixed indigenous beliefs with European fears of hidden pagan rituals. While many legends cannot be verified archaeologically, they likely preserve fragments of the labyrinth's original ceremonial significance. The psychological effect of the structure itself supports that possibility. Entering narrow stone corridors at high altitude, surrounded by silence and darkness, would have been an intense sensory experience long before artificial lighting existed. Firelight inside enclosed stone passageways creates moving shadows and distorted acoustics, conditions often associated with ritual architecture worldwide. One of the most important unresolved questions is whether the Inca were truly the original builders. The Titicaca region had already supported advanced societies for centuries before the rise of the Inca Empire. The Tiwanaku civilization flourished near the southern edge of Lake Titicaca between roughly AD 300 and 1000. Tiwanaku engineers built monumental stone structures, sophisticated drainage systems, and ritual complexes aligned with celestial events. Because the Inca frequently incorporate old sites into their own religious system, some archaeologists suspect parts of the Chincana may stand on pre-Inca ceremonial foundations. Evidence remains incomplete, but differences in masonry style across sections of the labyrinth have fueled debate. This pattern appears throughout the Andes. The Inca often expanded or modified earlier sacred locations rather than building entirely new, ceremonial centres from scratch. If the Chinkana contains older structural layers, it could represent centuries of evolving ritual use rather than a single construction project. Near the west bank of the Nile in southern Egypt, beside the ruins of Monastery of St. Simeon, massive scars still cut through the granite hills of Aswan. Some trenches descend directly into solid bedrock. Some blocks remain frozen in place as if the workers vanished in the middle of extraction. And across the stone surface, strange pounding marks, unfinished channels, and quarry symbols are still visible nearly 3,500 years later. This region, often associated with what researchers now call the Simeon Monastery Quarry Area, formed part of the enormous quarry network of ancient Aswan, the primary granite source for many of Egypt's obelisks, colossal statues, temple columns, and monolithic structures. Archaeological surveys confirmed that the Aswan quarries were active from the Old Kingdom through the Greco-Roman period, with roads, ramps, unfinished monuments, inscriptions, loading areas, and extraction pits still preserved across the landscape. The mystery surrounding this quarry is not whether the Egyptians worked here. The evidence is overwhelming. The real mystery is how a Bronze Age civilization managed to quarry, shape, transport, and polish granite on a scale that still seems industrial, even by modern standards. The most famous object connected to this quarry system is the unfinished obelisk, studied in detail by British Egyptologist Reginald Engelbach in 1922. The unfinished monument measures approximately 41.75 metres long and would have weighed nearly 1,100 to 1,200 tonnes if completed. Archaeologists believe it was commissioned during the reign of Pharaoh Hatshepsut in the 18th dynasty. Around the 15th century BCE, cracks appearing in the granite forced workers to abandon it while it was still attached to the bedrock. That abandoned daffodils. That abandoned obelisks became one of the greatest archaeological windows into ancient engineering ever discovered. Unlike completed monuments, the quarry preserves the actual extraction process. Tool marks remain visible on the stone. Ochre guidelines still run across sections of granite. Deep trenches show where workers isolated giant blocks from the surrounding rock. Archaeologists from the Supreme Council of Antiquities reopened large excavations at the site in 2002 and uncovered quarry tools, unfinished objects, worker graffiti, extraction pits, hieratic dates, Greek inscriptions, and evidence of multiple quarrying phases spanning thousands of years. One of the biggest mysteries involves the stone itself. The granite of Aswan contains large quantities of quartz, which ranks around 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Copper tools used during much of ancient Egyptian history rank far lower, yet the quarry walls display long channels, remarkably even cutting surfaces, and rounded extraction trenches that appear extraordinarily precise. Archaeologists believe workers primarily used hard dolerite pounding stones to fracture and shape the granite. Hundreds of these pounding stones have been found throughout the quarry landscape. Even so, the scale of the operation remains difficult to comprehend. Some trenches extend for many metres through solid granite. Certain surfaces appear surprisingly smooth despite the hardness of the material. In several places, repeated impact marks create parallel textures that almost resemble mechanical machining. Alternative history theories often exaggerate these features. But even mainstream archaeology admits the site demonstrates an astonishing level of labour organisation and technical skill for the Bronze Age. The mystery becomes even greater when transportation is considered. Extracting a 1,100-ton obelisk from bedrock was only the beginning. It still needed to be moved. Archaeological evidence suggests the Egyptians relied on sledges, lubrication using water or mud, manpower, ramps, and Nile transportation during flood seasons. Quarry studies in Aswan identified ancient roads, ramps, and loading areas connected to the river. But the engineering challenge remains staggering. A completed obelisk weighing hundreds of tons had to survive extraction, movement across rough terrain, loading onto barges, river transport northward, unloading, erection, and final polishing, all without catastrophic fracture. Even modern crane operations involving stones of similar size require enormous planning. The unfinished obelisk demonstrates how close ancient engineers came to pushing the material beyond its structural limits. One overlooked detail discovered during the 2002 excavations was the presence of quarry worker markings and administrative records. Archaeologist Adel Kelani documented sketches of boats, obelisks, ostriches, geometric symbols, hieratic dates, levelling lines, Greek names, and work marks carved or painted directly onto quarry walls. Some inscriptions may have been used to monitor excavation progress before the annual Nile inundation, which was crucial for transporting stone blocks by river. These discoveries transformed the quarry from a simple industrial site into something far more human. The walls preserve traces of the workers themselves. Some drew animals. Some marked extraction levels. Others left names behind. There are even indications that sections of the quarry continued operating into the Greco-Roman period. Archaeologists also believe some surviving quarries, traces near the monastery of St. Simeon, may relate to later construction phases associated with the monastery itself. That creates one of the strangest aspects of the site. Different civilizations reused the same quarry landscape for centuries. Pharaonic engineers, Roman workers, and later Coptic communities all occupied parts of the same granite terrain. The result is a layered archaeological landscape, where ancient Egyptian industrial activity exists beside Christian monastic ruins and Greco-Roman inscriptions. Another mystery still debated today involves precision. The unfinished obelisk preserves evidence of extremely controlled fracture management. Ancient workers needed to predict how granite would split under repeated impact. A single uncontrolled crack could destroy years of labour. In fact, the abandoned obelisk itself became useless because hidden fractures appeared inside the stone. This means Egyptian quarry workers possessed a highly practical understanding of stress behaviour inside granite long before formal geology or material science existed. The quarry also challenges the popular image of ancient Egypt as merely a civilization of temples and pyramids. Sites like this reveal something much larger. An organised industrial system capable of mobilising thousands of workers, coordinating logistics across the Nile, managing quarry schedules around seasonal flooding, and shaping some of the largest monoliths ever attempted in human history. In many ways, the real technological secrets of ancient Egypt may not lie inside the pyramids at all. They may lie inside the quarries, because unlike finished monuments, quarries expose the raw process itself. The mistakes remain visible. The abandoned blocks remain trapped in the stone. The extraction trenches were never hidden behind polished architecture, and the scar left across the granite still preserved the physical evidence of how ancient engineers, confronted one of the hardest natural materials on Earth. Today, the quarry landscape of Aswan remains one of the most important archaeological engineering sites in the world. UNESCO included the quarry region within the broader Nubian Monuments World Heritage designation in 1979. Yet despite more than a century of study, the site still raises unsettling questions. How did ancient workers maintain such precision while carving directly into granite bedrock? How were stones weighing hundreds of tons moved safely across Egypt? How did Bronze Age engineers coordinate operations at a scale large enough to supply temples and monuments across an entire civilization? A narrow beam of sunlight enters a stone passage in northern Scotland and travels perfectly through darkness before striking the rear wall of a chamber hidden beneath a massive mound of earth. This happens only during the winter solstice. The alignment still works today exactly as it did nearly 5,000 years ago. Long before the pyramids reached the skyline of Egypt, the builders of Meishowe had already created one of the most sophisticated prehistoric monuments ever discovered in Europe. Built around 2800 BC on the Orkney Islands, Meishowe appears deceptively simple from the outside. A circular grassy mound rises quietly from the cold landscape, surrounded by some of the most important Neolithic sites in Britain, including the Ring of Brodgar and the Standing Stones of Stenness. But beneath that mound is a precisely engineered stone chamber that continues to challenge archaeologists, engineers, and archaeoastronomers today. The structure is older than Stonehenge in its final form, and predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by roughly 2 centuries. Yet, despite being constructed by Neolithic farming communities with no known metal tools or advanced machinery, Meishowe demonstrates a level of planning that seems far beyond what historians once believed these societies were capable of achieving. The most famous mystery surrounding Meishowe is its impossible relationship with the sun. Every year, near December 21st, the setting winter solstice sun aligns perfectly with the monument's entrance passage. Sunlight enters the narrow corridor, travels approximately 11 meters through the darkness, and illuminates the rear wall of the central chamber for only a few minutes before disappearing again. Even a slight mistake in angle or elevation would have ruined the effect entirely. Yet, after nearly 5 millennia of shifting climate, erosion, and structural settling, the alignment still functions with extraordinary precision. Researchers have long debated how Neolithic people could have calculated this phenomenon so accurately. To create such an alignment, the builders would have needed years, perhaps generations of careful solar observation. The movement of the winter sun across the horizon changes subtly throughout the year, especially at northern latitudes like Orkney, where seasonal daylight varies dramatically. Golden daffodils. This was not a random coincidence. It was a deliberate astronomical calculation carried out by people living in one of the harshest climates in prehistoric Europe. The mystery deepens when Meishowe is viewed as part of the wider Orkney ceremonial landscape. Nearby monuments also appear connected to celestial events, suggesting the region may once have operated as a massive ritual and observational complex. Some archaeoastronomers believe the monuments formed an interconnected system for tracking seasonal cycles, agricultural timing, and ceremonial dates. In that context, Meishowe may not have been simply a tomb. It may have functioned as a ritual observatory tied to beliefs about death, rebirth, and cosmic order. But the astronomical precision is only part of the puzzle. The engineering itself is equally difficult to explain. Inside the mound sits a large central chamber constructed from enormous sandstone slabs, some estimated to weigh as much as 30 tons. These stones were cut, transported, and fitted together with astonishing precision. Despite the complete absence of cranes, iron tools, or wheeled transport technology, massive vertical slabs form the walls, while carefully layered stones rise upward into a corbelled roof designed to distribute pressure away from the chamber interior. The construction has survived over 5,000 years of Atlantic storms, freezing temperatures, moisture, and soil pressure without collapsing. What makes this even more remarkable is the environment in which it was built. Orkney experiences heavy wind, persistent moisture, and harsh winters capable of destroying poorly designed structures within centuries. Yet, Maeshowe remained unusually dry and structurally stable across millennia. Archaeologists believe the outer mound may have functioned not only as a ceremonial covering, but also as a sophisticated engineering solution. The thick earth surrounding the chamber helped regulate internal temperature, stabilize pressure, and reduce water infiltration. In effect, Neolithic builders may have created a form of prehistoric climate control and structural insulation thousands of years before such concepts were formally understood. The entrance passage itself appears psychologically designed. The corridor is extremely low, forcing anyone entering to crawl or bow before reaching the central chamber. Then suddenly, the confined passage opens into a much taller stone interior, creating a dramatic transition from compression to expansion. Some researchers believe this was intentional, part of a ritual experience meant to separate the outside world from a sacred ceremonial space beneath the earth. This raises another major question. Why invest so much labor into a hidden underground structure? Traditional archaeology classifies Maeshowe as a chambered tomb, yet the evidence for large-scale burial activity inside remains surprisingly limited compared to the immense effort required to build it. The chamber is larger and more elaborate than many burial sites from the same era. Its astronomical alignment also suggests a ceremonial role extending beyond simple funerary use. Some archaeologists now believe Maeshowe served multiple functions simultaneously. Tomb, temple, observatory, and ritual center combined into a single monument. For Neolithic societies, the winter solstice carried enormous symbolic importance. It marked the darkest point of the year, when daylight nearly vanished in northern Scotland. The return of sunlight into the chamber may have symbolised rebirth, survival, or communication between the living and the dead. In many ancient cultures, the movement of celestial light was closely connected to spiritual beliefs. Maeshowe may represent one of the earliest surviving examples of architecture designed specifically around cosmic events. Then, nearly 4,000 years after the monument was built, another civilization entered the story. In the 12th century AD, Norse Vikings broke into Maeshowe after the structure had remained sealed for centuries. According to evidence connected to the Orkneyinga saga, the Norse explorers likely entered through the roof rather than the original passage. Inside, they carved dozens of runic inscriptions into the stone walls. Today, these carvings form one of the largest collections of Viking runes ever discovered outside Scandinavia. Some inscriptions are simple graffiti left by travellers on High Triver boasting about their journeys. Others speak of treasure hidden within the mound. One famous rune describes the writer as the most skilled rune carver west of the ocean. But what matters most is the fact that the Vikings themselves viewed Maeshowe as a place of significance. By the medieval period, the monument was already unimaginably ancient. To Norse explorers, it may have the work of giants or supernatural beings connected to forgotten powers from the distant past. This created a second layer of mystery surrounding the site. Not only does Meisho challenge modern archaeology, it also inspired fear and fascination in people who lived almost 1,000 years ago.